You miss God because you miss yourself. The return begins within. Sometimes what we call distance from God is actually distance from ourselves. You think you've drifted from His presence, but what if you've just drifted from the parts of yourself He calls home? There's a sacred truth here. The way we love God, the way we connect with Him, is intimately connected to how we see ourselves and how we treat others. Love is not a separate category from your emotional reality. It's not a churchy sentiment. It is the organizing principle of your very existence. Love is not merely a fleeting passion. It's not a dopamine rush that comes from being wanted. It's not the fire of lust or the thrill of attention. Real love, divine love, is a voluntary act of courage. It's responsibility chosen in chaos. It's remaining open while the world tells you to shut down. It's staying soft in a world that celebrates hardness. And when you lose that, when the chaos of broken relationships, betrayals, and shame pulls you away from love, you don't just lose people. You start to lose yourself. And when you lose yourself, you start to feel like you've lost God too. Why? Because love is where He speaks. Love is where He heals. Love is how He reveals. And that love, it's not always easy. It demands everything you're afraid to give. Your vulnerability, your commitment, your willingness to sacrifice. But it also gives you back everything you didn't know you needed: identity, depth, transformation. Psychologically, love is how we become. It shapes our moral compass, the decisions we make in love, whether to stay or walk away, to forgive or retaliate, build the architecture of our character. And when we reduce love to just pleasure, to just something that serves us, we forfeit the very process that was designed to form us. Because pleasure doesn't require discipline, it doesn't ask for commitment, it doesn't grow you, it just feeds you. But love grounded in truth and mutual growth, that love burns, it burns away ego, it strips you of illusions. It forces you to look in the mirror and ask, am I really loving them, or am I just using them to avoid the silence inside me? This is the tension. We long for unconditional love, but we are terrified of what that actually requires. Because unconditional love isn't about accepting perfection. It's about entering into imperfection, yours and theirs, and choosing to stay. To love someone not despite their flaws, but because of the shared burden of being human, is an act of worship. And this is where God meets us, not in our curated performances, not in our religious routines, but in the raw, trembling spaces where we say, God, I don't know how to be, but I want to become. Where we drop the masks and return not just to Him, but to ourselves, to the child in you who believed, to the soul in you that still dreams, to the spirit in you that longs to love deeply again, even after the betrayal, even after the silence. So if you feel distant from God, maybe the first step isn't to pray louder, maybe it's to get quiet. Maybe it's to feel again, to face the grief, to name the ache, to return to the person you were before the world taught you to perform your way to acceptance. Because that's where love lives, and where love lives, God never left. There's a kind of silence that doesn't mean God has left. It means He's waiting. But when you're in pain, when you're emotionally unraveling, when the noise of heartbreak and disappointment won't stop, that silence can feel like betrayal. You cry out, "Where are you, God?" And all you hear is your own echo. Let me tell you the truth, wrapped in the whisper of love, He's not gone. He's teaching you to feel what He feels. Love, real, holy, transformative love, is not built in noise. It's built in stillness, in the hidden spaces where you have to choose Him even when He doesn't feel close. And isn't that what love is? Not the thrill of always feeling connected, but the decision to remain committed even in the desert. Because love is not just an emotion. It's not the butterflies, the music, or the late night texts that make your heart skip a beat. Those things pass like storms. Philosophically, love is the architecture of existence, sits the principle that orders your chaos. It tells you who you are. It tells you who they are. It reminds you that despite the imperfections, the fragility, the failure, you are not alone. You are still chosen. But when we treat love as a hedonistic pursuit of pleasure, we reduce its meaning. We make it a performance, not a promise, and performance is exhausting. It demands perfection. It punishes failure. It requires constant proof, but love rooted in truth, discipline, and mutual growth doesn't punish you for being human. It invites you to be brave enough to stay human, to stay vulnerable, to stay open, even when it hurts. And here is the heart of this point. God's silence is not a rejection. It's a refinement. Psychologically, we know that love matures when it moves beyond dependency. Children need constant affirmation. Lovers in early infatuation crave constant feedback, but deep love grows. Love learns to trust in the absence of noise. Can you still believe you're loved when nothing is being said? Can you trust the covenant when there's no emotional high? This is the same tension we face in our closest relationships. We dream of unconditional love, but we run from the uncomfortable truth that it requires uncomfortable presence. It asks us to stay, to listen, to forgive, and to grow, not because the other person deserves it, but because love deserves it. And so, when God is silent, He is calling you to love like He loves, to sit in the silence not as a punishment, but as an act of faith. And that faith shapes your moral character. It deepens your emotional resilience. It grows your soul beyond instant gratification and into eternal communion. Loving someone not despite their flaws, but because of the shared burden of being, is what Christ did for us. He didn't wait for us to be perfect. He didn't demand clarity. He stepped into our chaos, into our pain, into our questions. So the next time you feel that divine silence, don't assume He's distant. Assume He's near and inviting you deeper into a love that transcends emotion, into a relationship built not on performance but on presence. Because the Holy Spirit speaks in quiet places. And if you'll sit long enough, you'll hear Him say, "I never left. I was just waiting for you to stop performing and start receiving." There's a sobering truth that love, real love, will always reveal. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you are. And if you're not anchored in the love of God, every relationship you enter will echo your emptiness. That's the danger of confusing attention with affection, chemistry with connection, pleasure with purpose. You think you're being loved, but you're just being distracted. You think you're growing, but you're just repeating. What you call romance may just be the reenactment of your own unresolved wounds. We were not designed to be completed by another person. We were created to be aligned with the one who completes us first. And when that vertical alignment is missing, the horizontal relationships we enter become places of projection, not partnership. We project our insecurities onto the other person. We make them the scapegoat for our unhealed trauma. We don't love them for who they are, we love the fantasy we need them to be. But here's the hard truth. Love is not about fantasy. It is about formation. Philosophically, love isn't merely an emotion we fall into. It's a decision we rise into. It's a practice, a discipline rooted in responsibility. And when love is reduced to a hedonistic pursuit of pleasure, it loses its moral force. It becomes consumption, and people become products. But true love, the kind that flows from the Spirit of God, calls us to be more than that. It asks us to become before we demand to be loved, because love, in its deepest form, is not what we feel. It's what we choose in the face of discomfort. Love is a voluntary act of courage, of giving without demand, of seeing someone fully, including their mess, their past, their fears, and saying, "I'm still here." Psychologically, that kind of love creates identity. When we are loved not for what we can offer, but simply for who we are, flaws, fragility, fears, and all, we begin to believe that we are worthy. And from that belief, we begin to act differently, We stop performing, we start becoming. But when we enter relationships with a spiritual void, we reverse the process. We use the relationship to create identity rather than to reveal it. We expect the other person to fix our loneliness, to stabilize our chaos, to define our worth. That's not love, that's dependence disguised as desire, and this is where many of us get stuck, caught in the tension between the ideal of unconditional love and the reality of human brokenness. How do we reconcile the two? By realizing that unconditional love was never meant to ignore flaws, but to carry them. To love someone not despite their flaws, but because of the shared burden of being human, is what makes love holy. It transforms the relationship into a sacred space, not because it's perfect, but because it's real. Because it's a mirror. Because it makes you face the parts of yourself you'd rather avoid, and offers you the grace to grow. So if your relationships feel chaotic, unfulfilling, shallow, or endlessly dramatic, pause and look within. What's missing might not be in them, it might be in you, not as blame, but as invitation. The invitation is this: come back to the source. Let God fill the void. Let His love reorder your inner world, because when He does, the way you love others will change. Not through fear, not through fantasy, but through formation, the kind of love that doesn't just feel good, but makes you good. And from that place, your relationships stop echoing your emptiness. They start echoing Him. There is a deception that lives deep in the soul of every broken heart, that the louder the love, the deeper it must be. But let me tell you something: not everything that burns bright is holy. Not every spark is sacred, and not every overwhelming emotion is love. We live in a world addicted to intensity. The drama, the passion, the late-night confessions, the makeups after explosive fights. We call this chemistry. We romanticize chaos, but underneath the thrill, many of us are not falling in love. We're falling into familiar patterns of pain. Here's the spiritual truth wrapped in emotional wisdom. Real love does not scream, it stays. Real love doesn't need fireworks to prove it exists. It walks quietly through your mess, listens when it's inconvenient, and chooses you on the days when you feel least deserving. Philosophically, love is not intensity, it's intimacy, a depth of knowing that transcends passion, and real intimacy requires presence, not performance. It requires honesty, not entertainment. It requires safety, not stimulation. But here's the hard part: intimacy is terrifying. Because to be known is to be vulnerable, and to be vulnerable is to risk rejection. That's why most people settle for emotional fireworks, because it's easier to feel something loud than to sit quietly in the discomfort of being truly seen. Love, in its truest form, is a voluntary act of courage and responsibility. It is not simply a feeling that sweeps you off your feet. It's a decision to build something eternal on the shaky ground of human imperfection. And that takes work. Psychologically, when we chase intensity, what we're often chasing is validation. We want the other person to mirror back to us our worth, and the higher the emotion, the more valuable we feel, until the emotion fades. Then we crash, then we chase again. This cycle turns love into a drug. But love was never meant to intoxicate. It was meant to liberate. There's danger in reducing love to a hedonistic pursuit of pleasure. When love becomes about what you feel instead of what you build, people become objects. The moment they stop making you feel good, they become disposable. But love rooted in truth, discipline, and mutual growth sees beyond the now. It's not afraid of the quiet seasons. It's not threatened by flaws. It leans in, not out, when things get difficult. This kind of love matures you. It teaches you how to sacrifice, how to listen, how to become. And this transformation is not only emotional, it's moral. Because how you love shapes who you become. And so we are left with this tension. We crave unconditional love, but we are terrified of giving it. We want someone to love us in our mess, but we hesitate to love others in theirs. Why? Because we have confused love with feeling good. But real love isn't always comfortable. Sometimes it hurts, but even that pain can be holy when it births growth. To love someone not despite their flaws, but because of the shared burden of being human, that's divine. That's what Christ did. He didn't love us because we were easy. He loved us because we were His, and that kind of love doesn't burn fast and disappear. It burns slow and it lasts, so the next time you feel overwhelmed by passion, ask yourself, is this intimacy or just intensity? Because the Holy Spirit never draws close with chaos. He draws close with peace. And the people He sends into your life to reflect His love will do the same. Many of us are searching for a love that only God can give, but we're trying to find it in the arms of people who are just as broken as we are, and so we run, through relationships, through hookups masked as healing, through the noise of affection, hoping it'll quiet the ache inside. We chase the feeling, the warmth, the validation. But when the dust settles, we're still empty, still aching, still asking, why am I never enough? Let me tell you why. Because you've been trying to receive from people what can only come from God. Love, in its highest form, is not a feeling. It is the outflow of divine connection. It is not a transaction. It is not a trade of pleasure for attention. It is the overflow of a heart that has already been filled by something eternal. Philosophically, love is a fundamental organizing principle of human experience because it teaches us what we were created for: relationship, not just romantic, but spiritual, moral, eternal relationship with the one who formed us. When love becomes detached from that divine foundation, it collapses under the weight of human expectation. That's when it turns toxic. That's when we make idols out of people, expecting them to complete us, fix us, heal us. But they weren't made to do that, and neither were you. Psychologically, love requires the deepest form of courage, vulnerability. And that vulnerability, when not first anchored in God, becomes a weapon we use against ourselves. We open our hearts without discernment. We give away intimacy without covenant, and we confuse attention for affection. But when you let yourself be loved by God first, fully, without condition, without performance, that changes everything. Because only in the presence of perfect love can you stop striving to prove your worth. And when you stop striving, you start loving freely. See, many of us want love to be easy, but true love is not effortless, it's sacrificial, and sacrifice isn't romantic until you've seen what it costs. Love is inconvenient, it stretches you, it confronts your ego, it calls you to forgive when you'd rather leave, to stay when you feel like running, to give when you're empty, and to trust when you're afraid. Why? Because love, real love, is not just an emotion, it is a choice repeated in the face of chaos, and here's the paradox. Only those who are rooted in God's love can love like that, because only He gives the kind of love that can survive human imperfection. We often speak of unconditional love as an ideal, but we struggle to live it. Why? Because it requires a brutal honesty. We are flawed, we are inconsistent, we are selfish, and yet we want someone to see all of that and stay. But how can we offer what we haven't received? You cannot give unconditional love if you haven't sat long enough under the waterfall of God's mercy. To love someone not despite their flaws, but because of the shared burden of being human. That is spiritual maturity. That is sacred love. That is Christ-like love. And when you love from that place, when you're filled from the well that never runs dry, your relationships change. You no longer demand perfection. You offer grace. You no longer chase to feel whole. You walk in wholeness and attract others who are healing too. So maybe the love you've been chasing was never missing. Maybe you just haven't slowed down long enough to receive it from the one who's been offering it all along. Return to him, be filled, be loved, because only then can you love the way your soul was made to.